All right, welcome to season 3 of the Find Your Summit podcast.
Mhm.
Episode 301. I am Brian,
And
as
I'm
I have been for the previous 2 seasons.
I have not changed identity.
Thank God. That'd be so hard to keep track of. I'm excited to be back, and I think one of the fun things is this podcast has evolved over the 12 months. Like this might be our podcast anniversary coming up.
Anniversary, yeah.
This was right before President's Day. I think it's, we've tried to figure out what we wanted to accomplish. And I think as we were talking yesterday, we sort of had a bit of a breakthrough, perhaps, of like, we're building this awesome brand in Summit Coffee. And we talk about so many other things, but it's also hard to share the story of what we're doing. And so if we can use this platform to really let people behind the curtain of like building the Summit Coffee brand and what that looks like on a week to week basis, because as you know, it is super dynamic. It does change all the time.
Yeah, it does, for sure. And I also like the opportunity to show like the transparency of just like it, like what happens to Summit behind the scenes, and like what it's like to be building this brand that has been around for so long, but it's also growing and transforming I feel like every week.
Well, when people ask me, I've had so many meetings in the last 6 months where I'm introducing Summit and myself to people, and they're like, tell me about Summit. And one of the things I always say is that we've been around for a long time, and we have the foundation of a brand that's, almost at 25 years, but we function in a lot of ways like a startup.
Yeah.
We innovate often and quickly, and we try things. And I think that one thing you and I share is a belief that our marketing presence should be pretty transparent and authentic. And I do think we have a lot of things to celebrate and, announce. We feel like we have news every other week, but I do also think that we could do a better job of, talking about when we aren't sure what to post, or, when we're by ourselves at the office, or when, a third of our leadership team is on COVID quarantine right now. Like, I think that, we're in freaking 24 months of a pandemic. Like,
absolutely.
It's not beautiful. I mean, I'm sitting by myself in my house right now, which is not how I prefer to work.
Yeah, and I was in the office for the most part by myself for most of it. Was funny because after our meeting, I went back to the office and no one was in there, and I was like, I took a picture and I was just like, this is,
I'm by myself.
20 lonely times in 2022.
Yeah, well, I think, it's January 6th, and so it's our first podcast of the year. It's the first week of the year. And I think as you look out, and we talked about this quarter, but if you look at the next 12 months, we have so many ambitious goals. And so I think this will be a really fun platform for us and even others that we'll bring onto the podcast. I think the idea is that you and I will continue to provide the bookends of the podcast. And oftentimes it'll be just the two of us. Sometimes it'll be one of us with another Summit employee. We'll have guests on. I think we just want to provide it sort of a real time, on the go, what is happening at Summit, and and use that to also talk about bigger things. So it's like, cool.
Yeah.
We're launching this new brand project. Let's talk about branding. Let's talk about personality. Let's talk about process, whatever it may be. Like, I think this is, as it always has been, it will remain unscripted. I don't want to, I don't have anybody on the other side of the screen giving me cue cards right now.
You're not reading the prompts I'm giving you?
No, I talk way too fast to be with cue cards. They would it'd be spinning so fast.
It's interesting because I think that a lot of people want to hear those things from companies more. When I was scrolling through social media yesterday, I saw this video of this gentleman who was essentially saying, he only had 3 coworkers at work right now because of COVID, and everyone is the increasing numbers. And he mentioned, he was like, I want to hear more brands talk about that. Like, we all know that it's happening. It has been happening for a long time. And I think that like having this platform gives us, like you said, like a real time reflection of like what's happening today, and how does that reflect on like how are we as a company kind of taking those on, and while also trying to grow a brand.
I think go ahead. I mean, I think perspective is really important. Like, I think simultaneously we can celebrate our wins and also acknowledge that this is freaking hard. It's like trying to grow. It'd be so much easier in a lot of ways to grow brand if we could all be in the office together and we could feel like our baristas were totally safe and having fun and not afraid of getting a freaking pandemic. I think that you can't get a pandemic, but you understand what I mean. You get a virus that's part of a pandemic. It'd be really bad if you could get a pandemic. But I think like both these things are truths, and I think that's something I've learned in the last couple of years. I mean, perhaps in a clearer way than the past is like there rarely are things true or false or black and white. There's so much gray area. It's like that our desire as a society to like finalize and create finite or clear answers is almost impossible. It's like, yes, this pandemic sucks, but yes, also it's okay that we've grown our company and we've had success and like we can find joy even while there's a bunch of sorrow. Like those things don't need to, it's not like we need to, block ourselves from growing or celebrating or having fun or trying new things because of everything around us. Like,
yes. Yeah. Taylor Swift has a lyric in one of her songs that talks about how both can exist at the same time.
I feel like
from Taylor Swift.
Your recollection of Taylor Swift lyrics is like mine of like business books. I'm like, Danny Meyer in Setting the Table says, and you're like, Taylor Swift on the Red album is like
like both of these kind of things.
Hey, we all have our creative influences. It doesn't.
Yeah, but no, it's true. I mean, and I think like, again, having those conversations is important because I think that too many times, like, obviously we want to celebrate and I think celebration is great. And I think that it's a way to bring sunshine into people's like lives, especially during right now.
Yeah.
But I also think that it's important to recognize and talk about like when things aren't so great.
Yeah. And also recognizing like our world versus like the bigger world. Like I think finding that balance is tricky, but being able to be aware of both. Like, I don't think there are times when you need to obviously put your own personal world and problems on the back burner because there are bigger issues around us. But there's also times where you still need to, focus on your little world. And for me, a lot of times it's like, I kind of want to shut out sometimes and like pay attention to, today's the 1-year anniversary of the raid on the Capitol last year and like the riots and the attempt of like stealing democracy from the US. And like, sometimes I want to like channel focus, but it's like, I also have kids who like, I have a 6-year-old. So it's not like, hey kids, I can't pay attention to you and I can't walk you to school because, so you have to be able to have both truths. And I think, it sounds like I'm leading toward like a word of the year, like balance, which I'm not, but it is, I think that everything is dynamic. And I think this podcast, there's the dog. I think that the podcast will allow us to, talk about the challenges of that. It's not easy to, choose what to focus on because a lot of it is like, you have to like put something slightly in the background to be able to focus on,
One emotion that I felt a lot last year was like the fear of not doing enough in terms of like other things that are happening outside of my world.
Yeah.
But also recognizing like that I am one person and though it may not, one act of service may not have like this like crazy, life world changing effect. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything.
Totally.
And I think that's like another thing that recognizing as a company, like we want to do good by our communities and we have, we are going to do them, but we recognize that we may not always change the world.
Right. Yes, that's a great perspective and a great point. So as we look at this year, I mean, we talked about this yesterday, but have you chosen a word of the year as your intention, either personally, professionally, maybe it's both? Where are you with that?
Yeah, I did some thinking about it last night and some this morning, but I think it's just a reflection of like what I experienced last year and even the year before is just empathy. And I kind of chose that as like my word of the year. I don't think I had a word last year. If I did, I don't remember it.
If you did, it wasn't good.
If I did, it wasn't memorable. But I think moving into this year, like empathy is really important.
Yeah, talk to me about what empathy means to you in terms of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Empathy to me really is about resonating with how people are feeling and taking other people's feelings into consideration.
Yeah.
So, for example, it's like, I mean, I think that's important just like in my everyday life, like recognizing that my words and my actions do have an impact on the direct people around me.
Yeah.
And so just being more self-aware of that. And then also when it comes to, we talked a little bit about how we want our brand to like move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think keeping in mind empathy and recognizing how our communities, where our cafes are feeling, but also just the community of the coffee industry, like just taking what's happening around me into consideration as we start, like creating content or doing campaigns, and just recognizing like, just because I'm doing marketing for a company doesn't mean that I'm not human anymore. It's just like, recognizing that I am human and we are like, as a company, like there are humans that are behind this brand. And so how is that being reflected?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, leading with empathy, I think really sets a tone of awareness, perspective, all these things that are really important. And I think being empathetic to our staff, to each other, to ourselves, to our communities, I think is exactly right. It's like, the world goes on, the summit world goes on, and it's how you treat people and treat yourself and approach these things on a daily basis that really defines.
Yeah.
And so if you can, there's so many, we won't ever totally understand how baristas are feeling on a daily basis. Both of us used to be baristas, but neither of us have been baristas in a long time. And so like, trying to do the work to put ourselves in their shoes or to hear them or to really understand what they're going through 24 months into a pandemic, as in the service industry, it's like, I think that is, I think it is a really important word.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any parts of empathy that you feel like are hard for you innately, or feel like they're challenging based on the work that you're trying to do or trying to like push forward and succeed? Like, do you find that there are obstacles to being empathetic?
I don't know. That's a good question. Like, I don't see any like direct obstacles, but I think like you mentioned, it has been a little over a year now since I've been a barista.
Yeah.
But I think that, again, like submerging myself in the cafes a little bit more and recognizing like, and talking to our staff is a big piece into, once again, understanding like how everyone is feeling will be important.
Yeah. And I feel like, empathy literally, like being able to understand and process the feelings that other people are having, I think is, in your job in marketing is really important, because I think what you're trying to do is create content and tell a story that is meaningful to the viewer, the listener, the audience, wherever they live. And I think part of that requires a certain amount of empathy to like understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. And I think like knowing what questions to ask, and also just like providing that space too, that I genuinely care.
Yeah.
I really want to know, I feel like naturally people tend to open up to me anyway. So it's a little bit comes kind of natural. But I think that right now we are in a space where we feel like we can be a little bit more open and vulnerable, because so many people are speaking on it, and it's like a trickle effect where people feel like, oh, it's safe for me to talk about, how I'm feeling or what's going on, and my personal like points of view of it. So which I think is great.
Yeah. I think there's a very important distinction between empathy and sympathy that I think gets muddied a lot of the times. Sympathy is feeling sorry for somebody, feeling sorry that something happened versus like really trying to understand it and, whether it's help someone through it or just really understand where they are in their shoes. Because I think empathy, I feel like, has more of a forward movement, helpful aspect than sympathy. I mean, and sometimes you just need to be sympathetic for where people are. But I think as a leader, if you're constantly sympathetic, we're not actually moving forward. And I think there's not everything needs to move forward, but at some point things do need to keep going on. And like I said, the world around you goes on. And so, being empathetic about all the challenges that we're facing and all the obstacles and the realities of life, I think that's really important. And it's hard. I mean,
and I also think like empathy is also seeing where people are celebrating, like where there are good things that are happening and being able to celebrate the people within our company, the people within our community too.
Yeah. I think that's a great point.
What about you, Brian? What's your
my word's surprising. I've gone through a whole process in the last couple of days trying to think through it, and I picked a word of the year several years in a row. I had flourish as a word. I did curiosity 2 years in a row. I did humility last year, which in the Summit core values is sort of the partner to curiosity. But this year I'm choosing the word glow.
What?
Glow. Yeah. That's why I'm in portrait mode. And why I work into my tan. No, it's I think when you think of glow, it's like if something's glowing, it is like illuminated, it is bright, it is providing light, it is oftentimes warm. And I think as a leader of this company, I have a lot of energy and positivity and excitement. And I think to the extent that I can provide a smile or optimism or a light, figuratively, that helps people, that's I just want to radiate. I want to be more conscious about radiating a warmth that impacts others. I am very aware of, being the CEO of a company that employs as many people as we do, that I have a certain amount of, for lack of a better word, power to change the mood, change the tide, change the perspective. And I really want to keep perspective on the idea of glowing, because to me, that's a positive light. It's like what you're doing is you're trying to let something continue to shine.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that word.
I know it feels like a silly word, but I also I was I didn't want to choose. It doesn't feel genuine to me to choose resilience or I thought about all these after 2 years of the pandemic. It's determination, or it's those things I feel are innate to me. And to me, one of the important aspects of picking a word of the year is it's a defined focus around something that you want to make an intention for the year. I know that I'm going to work hard and I don't need to make that an intention of mine. But glow, I think I can sometimes be so focused on achievement and success and moving things forward that I'm not as aware of what I'm putting out into the world. And I think it's really important as both an individual leading a company and as our brand to be something that radiates light and warmth and guidance. And, I think of a light glowing in a dark house. You're just something that's a constant beacon of positivity and light and warmth. And I think that's, I think Summit, I think that's something we can offer to our communities. I think we did that at the start of the pandemic. And if it's something that I, as a leader, can do for all of our staff, if it's something that we as a leadership team can do for all of our employees and franchisees, if it's something that Summit can do, in every town that we're in or in the global coffee community. And I think that it's an important thing for us to recognize our place and the power that we have and the impact that we can have and try to make that as positive as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great mindset to have moving forward into a year where we're not quite sure what's going to happen.
Right. I mean, for a lack of a, the perfect metaphor, I feel we as a company now, more than we've ever had before, have a microphone or have, this light that people are looking toward us. There's news about us, we're growing, we're putting ourselves out there. And so the focus for that to be positive, to use that microphone to say the right things, to say important things, to be empathetic, to be transparent, but also like when people look up to you, be something that provides positive news, positivity into people's lives. And again, that can manifest itself in so many ways, whether it's like the customer coming to get a cup of coffee, or being a good employer, or being a good friend. Like there's so many ways that we can do that. And I think it's really important for us to try to be something that glows in a world that has so much uncertainty, that, you know, has a lot of like vitriol, there's a lot of division. And I think like if we can set a standard of like, you know, here's our glow.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
be a moth to the flame. Come
a moth to the flame.
Maybe moth should have been my word of the year.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think like, again, when we think about as a company, the things that we're doing, whether it's like, you know, events in our spaces, or it's just really thinking about ways that we are being that glow in our communities.
Yeah. And I think, you know, something we're about to announce, and for our podcast listeners, they'll get a, you know, a sneak peek, but like we are removing the surcharge for alternative milks. And it's like, it's one thing, but it's a pretty important thing. And it's a rare thing in specialty coffee.
Yeah.
But I think it's like, okay, somebody's opening a bunch of stores. What kind of standard are we setting and what's important to us? And we say that sustainability is important to us, and climate change is something that's more and more and more important, and more in the news. And I think like, okay, let's put it out there, and let's say, you know, can we be the influence? You know, for years we've learned from other coffee brands and other retail brands, and to the extent that there's companies that are going to be learning from and being inspired from us, whether it's on our podcast or by visiting our cafes or working with us, like I think that's an example of like us deciding we're going to do something, and hopefully setting a precedent that people can do it. Like, you know, sometimes you just have to, you know, put it out there, because when people look at you, it's what are you doing that, you know, people are going to be looking at us. And I talked to you about that yesterday. There's a certain pressure about being a company that's growing and of the size, because equally while people get excited for you, like we're encountering also people like they're going to be naysayers. There's people that aren't going to be excited about our growth, or people that want to get mad at me or get mad at Summit just because that's what it is. And so like the more that you can make thoughtful decisions and be pretty unabashed about what you're putting out into the world, I think is, you know, is all that we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we did talk about like the bigger we get, the more attention that's on us. And so it's like, again, it's like, okay, like we're approaching this platform now, and it's what kind of impact do we want to have? And I think we've always thought that way. It's just the platform is just getting bigger.
And I think to a certain extent, and there's like a little bit of it's a weird way to put it, but there's like a burden that comes with growing and like with leadership. And for me as an individual, and Summit as a company, like it's more impactful what we do now. It's like we've always thought this way. We've always tried to, and have a very good track record of doing things the right way. But like we employ more people, we have more partners, our, you know, who we choose as vendor relationships matters more. And like what we put out into the world just is a little louder and a little bit brighter than it ever was. And so it's almost more important for us to, you know, be thoughtful about what we're doing. And at the end of the day, we're trying to provide happiness and joy into the world. And if we can be leaders on doing that, and, you know, just in the manners that how we talk to people, of how we, you know, the decisions we make, the partners we work with, the kind of supplies we buy, I think, you know, we just need to continue to, you know, try to be the best company we can be, and acknowledge that we're going to screw up. Like, obviously we're going to make mistakes.
Right. Yeah. As everyone does.
Right. But let those glow too. And I think that's the point of this podcast. Like if we F up, like, great, let's talk about it. Like, because we want vulnerability, and, you know, to be part of our brand too. And so, you know, to the extent that we can make it okay for companies to talk about screwing up, like, awesome.
Yeah.
We all screw up.
And I think, I mean, again, going back to like just what I've been seeing people want to talk about, they're like, I want to hear companies talk more about this, like the mess ups, the hardships, the failures, or whatever, because it's not like every brand is immune to them.
Yeah.
So
I feel like season 3 of the podcast is like, you're probably too young to remember when Real World was a big show.
Yeah,
but it was like I think the motto for Real World was like, it was like when roommates stop being polite and start being real.
Yeah.
That's like season 3. It's like, I mean, and not to say we have not been genuine, because I think humor and joy is like everything that we've done on this podcast for 2 years is very genuine. And I hope that we still find constant opportunities to make people laugh and find joy. But like, it's also time to talk about real things too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I can't wait to look back months in and listen to these podcast episodes and be like, wow.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, everybody who's listening, watching, we appreciate your viewership and your listenership, and please reach out to us, podcast@summitcoffee.com. We'd love to hear from you all year long. We've got some exciting things in store. We've got some guests lined up. We've got tons of Summit people that we're going to get on the calls as well. But we're looking forward to a great third season.
Awesome. All right.
All right, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.